They're a really cool fish in terms of they're very aggressive, they're right on the surface, and they're very aerial when you catch those guys.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Today, our destination is Elfin Cove, Alaska, home of some of the best halibut, salmon, and steelhead fishing anywhere. Our guest this week is expert guide Kieran Oliver with Elfin Cove Resort. Elfin Cove is a remote fishing lodge right across the bay from Glacier National Park. Kieran guides in both Alaska and Colorado and is here to tell us about the world-class fishing opportunities in this part of Alaska. Kieran, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. We have a lot to talk about because you're out on the oceans and you're up in the rivers. Let's start with the area. Tell us a little bit about Southeast Alaska and the area you operate in.
Yeah, so Elfin Cove Resort is located about 70 miles west of Juneau, the capital of Alaska. So we're down in the little panhandle there, and we're on a little island called Chichikov Island. So
okay,
we're right on that northern tip, and it's in the Tongass National Forest, and we're right across from Glacier Bay National Park. So we do a lot of fishing out on the ocean, and then well as a couple of the rivers, like you mentioned, over in the on the Tongass.
Okay, so tell me why do so many people make the trip all the way to Alaska to fish? What is it about Alaska that's just so amazing?
You know, I think people come up there to see the scenic beauty, kind of the remoteness. It definitely has that last frontier feel to it. So when you get out there, it's, I know for me, I just kind of have that butterflies in my stomach sort of thing. And it really is truly wild still. So, you know, you see tons of bald eagles and all sorts of wildlife. So I think that's one of the reasons that people come up there is to experience that remoteness.
Yeah. And you guys, you told me before the show that you could see a glacier right out from your windows of your lodge, right?
Yeah. That's why we say we have the best view in the cove is we look right out onto the Brady Glacier, and it's right on the southern end of the Fairweather Range. So the Fairweathers are this huge mountain range right across from us, and they go all the way up to 15,000 feet from sea level across from us. So it's this huge, you know, it's the terrain up there is really daunting. So that's a pretty cool feature of the area as well.
That's amazing. From 0 to 15,000 feet. That's incredible. And there's a bunch of humpback whales in the water up there too, orcas and seals, things like that, right?
Yeah, and we see them all the time just from our lodge while we're eating dinner. So it's kind of like a National Geographic right out the windows for us. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. And see a lot of those guys. We've got a resident pod of orcas that hang out in Cross Sound and up into Glacier Bay National Park. And so we see those guys pretty frequently, as well as just sea lions, seals, all the birds, and yeah, just all sorts of stuff.
That sounds amazing. Tell us about Elfin Cove Resort. So it's got a rich history from back in the 40s even?
Yeah, so started out as a little fishing outpost out there, and you know, in the 40s they stationed an aircraft carrier during World War II out there, and it was for, you know, in case the Japanese came to invade into the Inside Passage. So we're kind of that last destination on the Inside Passage. So they were trying to be prepared for that.
Okay, and now I read that you just remodeled the place, and it's been a fishing resort for since the 60s or 70s?
Yeah, it started out as a little A-frame, and then every year it seems that we just tack on another little section to it, and now it's built out into a bigger lodge, and we can have up to 32 guests at a time.
Okay.
And so Mike's done a really good job of kind of refinishing the place, and he had a good construction background, so
that helps.
Yeah, when we're not fishing, it's usually working on something with him. So
okay. And how do you get there?
So the only way to get out to Elfin Cove is either by boat or plane. So you have to fly into Juneau, And then we set up a little beaver, one of the, 19, I can't remember, it's like 1960s, like the beavers.
Sure, beavers and otters, yeah.
Yep, yep. And so we fly people out on those, and it takes about 35 to 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a beautiful flight over Icy Strait, and you get to fly over Glacier Bay National Park, and you can usually see a lot of cool wildlife. And the pilots love, taking people in to take pictures, and you can see the Dall sheep and mountain goats and
nice,
all sorts of stuff as you fly over. And then, you land in Elfin Cove right on our float plane dock, and we unload you there.
Nice. That sounds amazing. I bet that's exciting when you finally get there and step off that plane onto that dock to spend a couple days up there with you guys.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People are usually pretty excited about that. So
yeah, I'll bet. So tell me about the fishing opportunities there. So what you've got ocean fishing, which is mostly halibut, but salmon as well. And then you guys head up into the rivers too, right?
Yeah. So kind of the main thing that people come up to Elfin Cove to do is our ocean fishing opportunities. So Elfin Cove is really well known for its halibut fishing. We have really world-class halibut there. So people come out to get a trophy, and usually after a week of fishing, it's, pretty good odds that you're going to get one over 100 pounds. And
wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of our main thing that people like to come up and do. And we troll for all 5 species of salmon. And we have abundant rockfish. So I think we have like 26 different species out in the ocean and through all the different depths of the water and that anglers can catch.
Okay.
And yeah, so we got the king salmon that swim through there, coho salmon. We actually have some sockeye salmon as well that swim in. And then, your pinks and chums too.
Nice. Plenty to go after.
Yeah. There's a lot to do in one day. So people are usually pretty tired afterwards.
So what's it like to haul a 100-pound salmon, halibut up off the bottom of the ocean? Is it like pulling up a 4x8 sheet of plywood?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people compare it to. So they, it can be actually pretty fun. Besides, just kind of pulling up a dead weight. People always say it's like pulling a plug out of the bottom of the ocean. But if you actually get them in some of the shallower water, they'll make a lot more run. But it's definitely you're pulling up a lot of weight, and the big ones definitely don't even know they've been hooked. So they're just keep swimming, and they don't even know you're attached to them. So
is that right?
Yeah.
So talk about a halibut. There may be some people out there that aren't 100% sure what a halibut is or what it looks like, but it's kind of an unusual fish. It's a flatfish, right?
Yeah. So they're, kind of like a flounder, is how most people would compare them, but it's a flatfish. They generally stay close to the bottom, and, one side of them is darker, and then the other side is white. So they're laying down on the bottom, and then they'll come up, and they're more of an ambush predators, from what I've heard and stuff. So they'll kind of sit by a rocky outcropping or something like that, and they'll, be waiting for a smaller fish to swim over the top of them, and they'll come up and grab it. But they're generally staying within that first 20 feet of the bottom. But, we've had some experiences. They're pretty curious fish, and they'll follow up other fish or, your rigs, and you'll see them because that water's so clear up there, and closer to the boat. So,
okay.
But generally they're down there hanging out.
Oh, that's great. How did you end up in Alaska? And you guide in Colorado too, right? What's your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, so around the Boulder area. And then I ended up going up to Alaska. It was 2013. So my family had been going up there. And they just kind of had some connections to Elfin Cove. And I got hired on with my cousin originally.
Huh.
And we basically were just dock hands. So we just cleaned boats, and we filleted a lot of fish and packaged them, put them in the freezers for anglers. And we did that for an entire summer. And then after one summer of doing that, I decided that I actually wanted to be on the boat catching the fish with them. So
it sounds a little better.
Yeah, exactly.
But you probably got pretty darn good at filleting fish though.
Oh yeah, man. We had, it was just me, him, and one other guy. And, we would do so many fillets in a single day, just, cleaning all the fish. And I mean, we got to fish quite a bit too during the day. So that was pretty fun. But I decided I wanted to hop on the boats. And so I spent 2 years Elfin Cove Resort doing some deckhanding for captains, and just kind of worked up my sea time, and I applied and got my captain's license, and started running a boat out there. And here we are today. So now I'm doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just kind of worked my way up.
Yeah, life's good.
Yeah, not that bad. So, and then I kind of split time now. So I was doing the Alaska full time, and then kind of decided that I wanted to break up the summer a little bit. Spending 6 months in Alaska out of the year was kind of difficult, making that transition back and forth between Colorado and Alaska. So I decided to do a couple months out of the year in Alaska now, and then once runoff and everything ends in Colorado, I'll go back to Colorado and guide, and can kind of extend my season out and at least see people every now and then, because Elfin Cove is it's out there, so.
Right. Yeah. And in Colorado, you guide out of where? What fly shop?
I guide out of Kirk's Fly Shop, and I've been doing some float trips for him out on the Colorado River.
Nice.
And we also guide in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Nice. And Kirk's is in Estes Park, right?
Yeah, it is. So he actually has 2 locations, Estes Park and then Grand Lake, Colorado. So
okay,
kind of both sides of Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah, he's got it covered. I'll be out there in July, hopefully, if the coronavirus lets me get on an airplane.
yeah, I hear that. So
yeah,
if you come out, let me know. So
yeah,
we can
absolutely
set you up on some good spots. So.
Oh man. Well, I joined this Rocky Mountain Anglers Club, and I think that's how I got your name. And these guys, you can join this club, and for a couple $100 a year, you can pick private water in Colorado. They got like 40 or 50 locations scouted out for you, and you just call ahead, and you pay a rod fee, but it's really reasonable. And you're guaranteed private water, and they've got good maps on what those locations are like. So that's what we're going to be doing. Give that a shot.
Yeah, I fish their water quite a bit, and that was actually one of the things that I did when I wasn't working in Alaska. Was I went and worked with those guys during the winters, and
okay,
yeah, with Casey and Greg and Chuck and those guys. Like, they're all, there's only 5 or 6 of them that run that whole club. So yeah, it's a really good deal, and they've got some phenomenal water that you can go and fish. So I know you'll have a good time checking that stuff out.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, so let's get into some fishing stuff here. Let's talk about halibut fishing. So, what is the allure of halibut fishing for people? What do people love about this?
I think the allure of halibut fishing kind of stems from, I guess, that kind of older traditional fishing with filling up the cooler, and the meat on those fish is just, it's a phenomenal eating fish. So the cold water species and everything just makes for really good meat. And that's probably the biggest reason that people can come up is kind of filling the cooler. And, for those fish in particular, I wouldn't say there's anything phenomenal about the fight in general. It can drag on for a long time, and it takes several people to bring in a big fish. But I think at the end of the day, people love bringing it back and grilling it up and kind of telling those fish stories of bringing that thing in.
Okay. Yeah, they're fantastic to eat for sure. So what does a halibut eat? If it's laying on the bottom, I read somewhere it eats just about anything that fits in its mouth. But what's been your experience?
Yeah, I would say that is absolutely true. They they eat just about anything, generally fish. They eat, they love octopus, and, kind of any of those bottoms fish, we always say if you can get an octopus when you're out there, that is like the best halibut bait that you can find.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, when I was filleting stuff with my cousin, we used to find all sorts of crazy stuff in their stomachs. So anything from, I think one of the weird ones that we found was a trash bag that it ate. We used to find tons of octopus beaks because they would eat the octopus, but they couldn't digest the beak.
Okay.
So we used to find that. We found previously filleted fish that, somebody was, throwing off the back of a boat or something like that, cleaning fish, and the halibut were eating all that sort of stuff. So I would say they're pretty opportunistic, and they'll just eat whatever comes in front of them.
old shoes, toilet seats, those sorts of things too, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they're not picky.
Talk to me, maybe take me through the seasons up there. What are you doing early season, mid season, late season? Are you mixing it up? Are you fishing for halibut always? Or are you, when do you decide to go in and hit some rivers?
Yeah, so halibut fishing for us and kind of the bottom fishing is pretty much our entire season, going from May into September. Just and then there's some kind of closures and stuff that the state will do on certain species or openings for them. So we just kind of abide by those. But generally, our bottom fish is a year-round thing. And then for salmon, you're looking at king salmon are kind of the early part of the season for us. So May going into June, kind of peaking in July.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cool things that we have in the spring fishing is that's actually when you catch some of your bigger king salmon, because the kings that came in last year or the year before,
yeah,
they tend to hold. Sometimes they'll get into really good food, and instead of running up into a river, they'll hold an extra year in the sound that we're in. And so you can actually catch some of your bigger fish in that early part of the season because they are tail end fish from the year before.
Nice.
And so a lot of the fish that we're catching at the early part of the season are over 20 pounds for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice size fish.
And so as you move into the season, we get into June and we'll start to get a little run of cohos, and they're going to be some smaller fish. So anywhere from 6 to 8 pounds or something like that when they first come in.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of funny, like that first little wave pushes in and then they kind of taper out. And then once you get into July, it's just, every week you get more and more of them, and they tend to put on a little bit of weight and about, and a couple inches with every week as they start coming in. So your bigger cohos are going to be in that end of August going into September.
Okay.
That's when you're going to catch a lot of your bigger fish.
And how big does a coho get up there for you?
A really big coho, you're looking at 15 to 20 pounds.
Yeah.
For one of those fish. I think the record is a little over 20. I think it's like 22 or something like that.
Okay.
For one of those. But they're a really cool fish in terms of they're very aggressive. They're right on the surface and they're very aerial.
Yeah.
When you catch those guys. And it's very high action. Like when you're in them, I mean, the cohos are thick and, you'll have 4 rods out and you'll have 4 rods with fish on them. So, we like to say you got to do a little dance on the back of the boat, with people, anglers going underneath each other, trying to unwrap the lines because you'll have a coho going one way or diving down, or this one's jumping in the air and you got to move everybody around. And, it can be pretty chaotic, and you're just trying to flip them in and, get the rods back in the water after you do that. So
good problem to have.
Yeah, exactly.
4 on at once.
Yeah, that happens pretty often when you're in August and you're putting down for cohos, and the limit on those guys is generally 6 per angler.
Okay.
And the way we like to do it is, we can limit out in about 2 hours, and then we just go catch and release, or kind of whatever the angler wants to do, and put them in the cooler and send them home for the guests. And
okay,
so that's kind of nice. And
yeah,
we also get a little run of sockeye that'll come in July. So we'll go into kind of the mouths of the rivers, and sockeye are kind of an interesting salmon species because they're filter feeders pretty much. So they eat a lot of plankton and everything. So it's really difficult to catch them when you're out trolling on the boat, because they're not going to eat the traditional lures that other salmon would. So a lot of the time you're snagging or netting for those fish. You can throw some flies to them. That's something that I like to do as well. Sometimes little squid can entice those guys to eat. Occasionally you'll catch them on regular spoons or something like that. But typically they're just kind of eating plankton and some of those really small organisms that you'll see in the ocean. But that's why their meat is actually really prized, is because, and it is so healthy, it's this bright red color. And it's just because of the organisms that they've been eating. So if you want a fish that has, really low mercury and kind of like the most healthy fish you can get, it would be sockeye.
No kidding. And you're fly fishing out in the ocean. Is that right?
Yeah, you can do that. Generally, the way that I like to do it is I'll run the boat up closer to the mouth of a river.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of in that little tidal area, you can get the boat in there, and then you can see the fish kind of schooling up or still moving around in the ocean. And, it gives you a little bit better chance at hooking those fish.
Okay. Oh, that sounds like fun. All right. So, and how late do you go in the season?
Oh, those ones, for those guys, probably the end of July. And then we'll keep fly fishing on, and you can catch those cohos and everything up until about September 15th is when we decide to close the doors and,
Yeah.
head somewhere a little bit warmer for the winter.
It's getting cold. That's why you're closing up. People don't want to come up there. Is that why?
Yeah, it just the weather starts to turn. It gets a little bit more unpredictable at that time. So it's logistically it's harder for us to get people in and out just because we get these storms that move in, and it's just more the float planes won't fly if the weather's bad. So
I see.
Which is
that's a problem.
Fine by me. Yeah.
Right. Tell me, so how do you go after halibut? What's the setup? What are you looking for? Weather. Are you using, what kind of bait are you using? Give us a little rundown on that.
Yeah. So halibut, traditionally, the biggest thing with those guys is the tides. So knowing your tides is knowing where the bait fish are going to be, and that can give you a better chance of knowing where the halibut are going to be. So when you first start halibut fishing, and that's one of the things that the captains have really good knowledge of, anywhere you go, is the tides and how important they are. And they're extremely important in Alaska because we get such big tidal swings.
Mm.
So, you can get anywhere from, I think it's like about a 17-foot difference on the tides on some of the more extreme ones. But, even a small tide exchange, you're looking at, 8-9 feet of water moving in and out of the sound.
That's a lot of current then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to make a difference on where it's going to push the fish and the bait and everything. So by looking at your calendar and knowing the tide, it'll give you a really good idea of where those fish are going to hold and be sitting at. And then you're using that current and the tide to your advantage. So the two ways that we'll fish to them is, your tides, and then you're also going to know the features under the water. So halibut generally like a big hump under the water is what we call it. So you'll see these features on your sonar, and the halibut will be sitting on kind of that leeward side of the current.
Okay.
The way that we'll set up the boat is either by going up current of that hump, and we'll throw out the anchor, and then we'll get out 4 rods, or just kind of depending on how many anglers are there. So you get one rod per angler, and then we'll hook up some bait onto that. And generally our favorite bait that we'll use is salmon bellies. That's kind of a good one to use. It's just kind of that octopus I was talking about. And you can rig them different ways onto there, but salmon's probably the most preferred one because they have like tough skin. They're very oily, so the scent will get out there. And that's what we'll put on there. And we're using big circle hooks on those guys.
Okay.
And then that circle hook will have a leader on it. And we're generally using about like 200-pound gannion.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, you're using basically rope
right.
onto those. Because like I was saying, those halibut, they're not going to be leader shy. They eat anything. So, but yeah, so we're putting that on there. Some guys, they go pretty crazy with it. They're preparing that salmon overnight. They're putting it in buckets, and they're putting like scents in there. The Procure is one of the favorites with different oils. They're coloring, but it just depends on the captain for that. But you'll take it and you hook it onto a lead weight. And we're not talking a small lead weight. We're talking generally 2 to 4 pound lead weights.
Okay.
That you hook this thing onto, because that's going to help it stick to the bottom with this large amount of current that we have. So you send that down, and then you wait for a little bit, generally 45 minutes to a spot. But your scent, when those hit the bottom, your scent's getting out there.
Yeah.
And it's, those halibut are picking up on it pretty quick, and they're actually coming up to your boat. They'll leave that little hump, and they'll come and find where that bait is at and eat it. So that's why you give them a little bit of time.
I see. How deep are you going? Does it vary?
Yeah, it varies on the spot. Generally, we don't like to go too deep. Elfin Cove is pretty fortunate in the area that we're at, where we don't have to fish too deep for them. So we'll be 200 feet, 300 feet sometimes. But, if you're looking at Sitka or other places, they're fishing 600 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a large ways to reel up a halibut. I mean, we could fish 600 feet as well, but it's pretty crazy. You can find them in shallower, and kind of the ideal thing for people is to find them in 100 feet.
Yeah, you're right. And I imagine
Makes reeling them in a little bit easier.
that fight's got to just be man against beast there, just trying to reel that thing up, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of weight on those guys, and so when you hook them on there, so they're coming up, and one of the interesting behaviors that halibut have is sometimes they'll actually sit on your bait, so they'll lay flat over the top of it, and they'll save it for later.
Huh.
It's just one of the interesting things that a halibut will do. And so we actually, surprisingly enough, have foul hook halibut, just because of that behavior and stuff. Sometimes they'll get foul hooked even with a circle hook, which is, it's really odd to have that happen, but
right.
Sometimes it can. But they'll sit on top of it, and sometimes they'll wait for another halibut to come over, and then they'll eat it. They see that other halibut coming, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was here. Like, this is mine." So, then they'll eat it, and then you'll have them on, and so we're kind of feeding it to them with that circle hook, and then bringing them up, and like you were saying, it's you pull up and then just reel down, and pull up and reel down, and
get them in.
Yeah, and sometimes the fight on a halibut, I like to think, is a lot more vertical, kind of up and down.
Right.
People think fighting a fish a lot of the time, they're pulling, dragging, they're swimming out away from you and everything. But a halibut's fight is they'll come up to the boat, and they see the boat, and they kind of see you, and then they'll swim right back down to the bottom. And then you pull them all the way back up, and then they'll swim back down to the bottom. Especially with a bigger fish, when you're getting into that 200-pound range.
Yeah,
that's a pretty typical behavior for them. Is they'll come up slow and swim right back down to the bottom. So you're usually in a fight for about 45 minutes on a big one.
Nice. Do guys usually hand the rod to somebody else? You take turns on the big ones?
Yeah, it depends. You get those guys that think they can do it, and they'll keep going until they're completely exhausted, and and get them all the way in. But then we'll have it and it's a whole boat event. For some of those really big ones where you're passing that rod off to somebody else, and it gets pretty exciting. Tapping people in to take over for them and stuff.
It's like
that.
Wrestling.
So yeah, exactly, it is.
It's like bar wrestling.
Yeah. Once you get it to the boat, that's when the wrestling match really starts.
Oh, wow.
So that's where my job kind of comes in with my deckhand. Is then you got to wrestle that fish into the boat, and that's where the battle, that's where my battle is, and you're trying to, to tame one of those big fish and all that.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I come from a long line of hunters and fishermen, and my grandmother caught a white marlin, and I grew up with this 9-10 foot white marlin mounted on my wall in my room, and a grizzly bear that she shot in Alaska, and I remember asking her about that white marlin, and she was telling me about fighting this white, and she was a not frail, but just pretty thin lady. And all the men on the boat were saying, "No, you got to bring it in yourself, or it's not your fish. You can't, we can't help you, or it's not your fish." And I remember that just stuck with me, like my grandmother was just dying here trying to bring this white marlin in, but she got the thing in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a crazy fight as a marlin. So
yeah. Oh, I'll bet.
I had a guy, he hooked one of those fish. I was gonna tell you about one of the other ways that we fish is this thing called mooching, where it's like you're using like 20 pounds, mono, and sending it down to the bottom, and it has a little herring on it.
Okay.
And I had this guy, he was 85 years old, and was one of the coolest guys I ever met in my life. And he ended up hooking, it was 112-pound halibut.
Wow.
And he caught it on this 20-pound leader.
Really?
Just on a herring. Yeah, it took him, I want to say it was like almost an hour. It was like 45 minutes to an hour to get this fish in. And he just very, very slowly just coaxed this fish up.
Yeah.
And when he got it close to the boat, I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, how do I get this fish, up? And all he wanted was just a photo. We were going to release this fish and everything. And I just wanted to get it for him. And so, we ended up just kind of reaching down and grabbing it and just very, very gently, just kind of pulling it into the boat.
Yeah.
Got a picture with
Did
it
you?
and we
Nice.
got a little measurement on it. And yeah, that was one of the coolest experiences there. Just seeing that guy. I mean, he had a story for everything. He was a cool guy.
Neat guy.
But, then he got to add that into his repertoire too. So
hey man, I hope I can go halibut fishing when I'm 85, right?
Yeah. He was something else. He was a cool guy.
Man, it'd be a workout for anybody, much less if you're 85. So you occasionally jig for halibut too, don't you?
Yeah. So that's one of the other things that we'll do is do the jigging for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll set up kind of with that current and everything. We'll set up above one of the humps, up current from it. And then we'll put out these jigs. They're usually 1 to 2 pound jigs, and big old head on them. And then they'll just have a little skirt, and we'll send that down. And then we drift with the current, and you just drift over that the top of the hump, and you're just lifting it up, putting it back down. And as it comes onto that opposite, kind of that downward slope of the hump, that's where those halibut are waiting in ambush, and they'll come up and grab it. And that can be a little bit more of an active way to fish for sure. But
yeah,
that's kind of the preferred way that I like to do it. It's a little bit more interactive, and you can really feel that tug, and
right.
That's pretty fun to do.
Sounds like fun. So what's a good day of halibut fishing? Like sizes, numbers?
Oh, good day of halibut fishing. It just depends on, some people like to focus on it all day. Usually what we like to do is break it up. So we'll do a couple hours of halibut fishing and a couple hours of salmon fishing. And we can usually catch our limit of halibut, which is, 1 per day per person, where we're at. And so we'll do that. And sometimes we'll catch and release the halibut as well. So, but out there, I mean, you could go all day just catching halibut.
Yeah, fun.
Wanted to, and kind of go for a bigger one. And usually throughout the week, we'll kind of do a day of a trophy hunt or something like that for one of them, and get some of those bigger fish. 100-pound plus is usually considered a trophy fish.
Yeah, I'll say. Do they taste as good when they're big like that?
That's one of the debates. You'll get different answers from different people. I think it's just harder to cook when they get bigger, because you'll have these, couple inch slabs of
Brontosaurus burgers. Yeah,
exactly. That's always my challenge. So if you ask a lot of the local people, the halibut that they like to keep are, about 40 pounds.
Okay.
That 40 to 60 pound range is a good eating fish.
Yeah, that's a lot of
what
meat.
Everybody says. It's a good thickness on the fillets. They're a fun fight at that size. That's pretty easy to catch. So that's kind of what everybody says. And then on the conservation point of view with it too, which I always like to mention to people, is your 100-pound fish with halibut are your breeding females.
Oh boy.
So once they get to 100 pounds, the males don't get that big. It's only the females that get that big.
Huh.
Yeah. So when you release one of those 100-pound fish, that's releasing another breeding female back into the population.
Generations of population.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they put out millions and millions of eggs. So
right.
Yeah, we like to keep the big girls around, and so they can go make more halibut. So
do the populations swing a lot from year to year?
They don't for us. We have a lot of good feed for them and everything, but one of the interesting things also about halibut is they're a very migratory fish.
Oh.
So they're actually one of the fish that are under an international treaty between the U.S. and Canada.
Huh.
So salmon is another fish that's under that, because they migrate, throughout the ocean, and then they come into the rivers. And halibut are on that same, or have their own treaty, but yeah, they're under that. And that kind of helps to regulate their movement and keep kind of the regulations similar across the whole Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Well, good. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about some of the river fishing opportunities you have there. What kind of rivers are in the area? What are you looking for? What are you going after? How are you going after those fish?
Yeah, so this actually kind of started with my Colorado background, growing up in the Rocky Mountains, learning to fly fish and everything. When I made it out to Elfin Cove, Alaska, people didn't really fly fish that much out there. It wasn't a destination for that. So I started kind of scoping out those rivers, and realizing that there was quite a few fish in there.
Good for you.
Yeah, so then it was, I mean, it's a largely untapped area. I mean, like Alaska is just so vast and remote, it'd be impossible to fish all those rivers in a lifetime. But, Elfin Cove's remoteness and kind of uniqueness has kept it away from everybody else. And so just kind of exploring those rivers and, wanting to fly fish for salmon kind of led me to them. And then I learned that there was actually steelhead in there too.
Nice.
And I was like, that was pretty surprising for me, to hook into one of those guys, and started exploring it a little bit more. And, we just have, I think it's about 11 different rivers in our area that we'll go and fish. So I'm just getting in there and fishing, and we have, basically all 5 species of salmon right there. The only one that doesn't run into those rivers is king salmon.
Oh, really?
Rivers are just not quite big enough, and the gravel's not big enough for them to spawn. So king salmon like big gravel to spawn in kind of bigger rivers. But we get every other fish in there as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Good.
Yeah.
How are you going after them? You like what weight rods you're using, tippets, what kind of flies you're using?
Yeah. So when we're going out there, so we're taking our mothership is what we call it, but just, one of the bigger vessels that we have. And then we have a little jet sled that will run up onto the beach and everything to access these rivers. That's the first challenge of the whole thing, is just accessing all this stuff. But, that's how we do that, is we just, get on the swim step and we take the guests in and everything. And then we get out on the rivers, and we're usually fishing that first half mile of water that's going in. And, again, watching those tides. So these fish, like an incoming tide. So the water's a little bit higher and they can get in, and you'll see these pushes of fish start to move into the river. And then we're using generally 7 weight rods. And I use just a heavier leader, 20-pound test, just because these fish are not leader shy at all.
Yeah. Why not then?
Yeah. I haven't had an issue with, having one shy away from it. And I've had more issues of, these fish taking you down the river and snapping off on a tree or something like that. So, it's better to go heavy and, hope it lasts. And so
are you waiting for these fish? Like how big is the river? If a king can't swim up it, I'm thinking this is a smaller river.
Yeah. So, it just depends on which river we choose, which is kind of the unique thing out there. Is we have a couple rivers that are a lot bigger that you couldn't wade across if you wanted to. They're bigger, more open, slow moving water. And then we have some smaller creeks that are around the area as well.
Cool.
That we'll go into, and it's a little bit more faster, kind of freestone sort of looking water. So it just depends on which one you want to go to and what experience you're looking for. And that's, again, one of the cool things in that area is you just have this incredible diversity of water and fishing that you can do. And I'll talk to people about, we'll look at our tide for the day, and we'll be like, okay, well, we have a really good tide to go into the river and, see if there's some steelhead on, the morning. And then as that kind of tapers off into the afternoon, we'll go do 2 hours of halibut fishing and put some fish in the cooler.
That's fun.
So yeah, it kind of just depends on that. But, the river fishing thing is kind of near and dear to my heart, and something that I've been working on and love doing and exploring. And so
what are some of the go-to flies for steelhead and salmon?
Some of the go-to flies, I think most Alaskan guides would say this is a Dalai Lama. That's probably my go-to.
Dalai Lama.
It's just a cone head. It's just a little articulated pattern, and they just come in different colors. And it's just basically 2 strips of rabbit fur and a little bit of flash behind a cone head.
Almost like a zonker.
Yeah, exactly. Just, very similar to a zonker, and they just move really good. And the bright colors on them just attract those fish, and that's what they like.
But you're telling me that like pink is a great color, but it also, if you're trying to catch bigger fish, tell me about that. That pink might not be the best fly to have on there.
Yeah, so when you're out there, it just kind of depends on what species you're going for. So if you have pink on, you're more likely to catch a lot of pink salmon. So if you're trying to more target, let's say a coho species, something more orange or green or something like that would be a better option, because you'll catch more cohos and less pink salmon.
Okay.
Is what you're trying to do behind the color. So, it's not so much that the color will, green's only working today, sort of thing. It's green will catch you more coho and you'll catch less of the ones that are, you're not trying to catch right now.
Yeah.
So,
and this is what time of year are you going into the rivers like this?
So when we're starting out for steelhead, we're looking at the springtime. So late April going into May, that's when we have a really good run of steelhead that go into some of these rivers. And it just depends on what river you're going into. And on those rivers, we're throwing, for those guys, intruder patterns, those dolly llamas. A lot of guys will throw egg patterns as well.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty sure way to catch a steelhead. You put a thingamabobber on and little lead weight and a bead above a hook or something like that is a pretty sure way to catch a steelhead. But a lot of people like the act of actually throwing streamers and moving them through the water, or swinging those flies down to them and everything. So
okay,
that's where I'm kind of at. Is I like moving it and seeing the steelhead move over, and
right.
So that kind of, to me, is a lot more fun.
Are you sight fishing for most of these fish?
It depends on the river. Those smaller freestone little ones that we have, you can sight fish for them, especially when they're first coming into the river from the ocean. So when I was first figuring this out, it was pretty cool just to sit there and watch for a little bit, and you can see the steelhead move in on a particular tide.
Yeah,
they'll come in, and they're still bright chrome, so they kind of show up a little bit better as they move into the creeks.
Okay.
And you kind of, one of the interesting things that stands out to me when I'm looking for them is actually their lips, because they're swimming and they have their mouth open a little bit, and it's almost like an electric blue sort of hue.
Oh, cool.
When you're looking through the water, and you can see them in there. And that was kind of one of the cool things, seeing these fish. And then you can choose how to target it, essentially. So you'll see this push of fish. It might be 25 fish in a given tide that'll come in. And then you can get up above the fish and swing a fly down to them, depending on how the water is. So especially on these smaller creeks, that's the only way to throw a fly to them, is you actually have to walk up the river and then fish down to them.
Okay. That's great. So you've got Alaskan brown bears up there, right? And they're pretty darn big.
Yes.
What do you see a lot of bears?
If you want to see a lot of bears, we can go to spots with them. I tend to avoid the spots with the big bears because I don't want to see them when we're fishing.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So yeah, I always pack a little heat when we're out on the river, so just in case. But yeah, there are some big bears out there. So the ABCs, which are Admiralty, Baranof, and Chichikov Islands, down in Southeast Alaska, have a very high bear density. And so we get those big coastal brown bears down there. And, I'll tell you, when you're looking at one face to face on the river, their arm is as big as your chest. So, they own the river. So you just kind of stay away from them and kind of appreciate them, because they're a cool creature to watch.
Yeah.
Very,
from a
very
distance.
smart.
Yeah.
Exactly. From the boat is generally my favorite place to watch them.
Yeah, exactly. So have you had any encounters, some encounters with some wildlife? I know you've got humpback whales, you've got orcas, you've got these bears.
Yeah, one of the coolest encounters that I ever had was actually out halibut fishing. And we were out there, and this guy had hooked into a halibut. It was a nice halibut, it's probably 50 to 60 pounds, and he's reeling it in, and we're having a good time. And all of a sudden, out on the ocean there, we call them witches' hats, but it's the orcas coming in. And
right.
They got that big black dorsal fin as they come across.
Yeah, I heard that. That's a great name.
They were coming right at us. And so I looked over at the guy, and I was like, man, you better start reeling quick. And so he's cranking as hard as he can on this halibut, bringing it in, and he gets it right up to the edge of the boat. And I mean, it's right there. Like, I'm standing there with the gaff about to bring this fish in. And, that water's so clear. I look down, and there's just this big black shape under the water.
Oh, man.
And it comes right up and eats that halibut probably 6 feet below the water, right in front of both of us. And it grabbed that fish and it turned and just, it was cool because we both just made eye contact with each other. Like, me and the orca were just looking, and he just takes that fish, and it was like almost like he was saying thank you, and then just took off. And they are so good at, biting that fish right behind the gill plate.
Yeah.
And so all you're left with is just like a mouth with a hook in it.
So he bit it off.
That's it.
So you okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that was all that we had left, was just the mouth and a hook.
Wow.
And, he took off. And I mean, the cool part about that though, the angler, he looked at me and he's just like, man, that was so cool. He's like, that was totally worth losing that fish.
Yeah,
just to see that,
Sure.
And they came right under the boat and took off. So
God, that's awesome.
That was pretty cool.
That's Alaska, huh? That's really cool. Well, let me ask you about the coronavirus and how that's affecting you guys. We're recording this in mid-May. What's it doing to your situation up there?
Yeah, so currently we don't have any guests up there. We're still shut down. We did file paperwork with the state of Alaska, so we can reopen and start to move, have guests come in and try to get a little bit of business for the summer. Our plan right now is calling for, lower capacity of guests that we can have out.
Okay.
Extra sanitation protocols for like our employees on the, taking temperatures and all that sort of stuff. But the main hang up for us, and I think it's the main hang up for most lodges, is that 14-day quarantine.
Okay.
When you come into the state of Alaska.
Right.
So it was set to expire on May 19th, but we just received word that it's going to be extended another 2 weeks.
Oh boy.
So we'll just kind of see. It was undetermined. He said, we're going to extend another 2 weeks, and then we'll make a determination at the end of that one. So we're hoping that gets lifted, and we can do a little bit of a season this year. But we're definitely counting on taking a smaller season this year.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so it sounds like April was a wash. May is now a wash, and so maybe June through the end of the year, if you're lucky, we'll see. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And we were fortunate enough to, we had our May totally booked with guests. We were fortunate enough, though, to be able to change the dates around and, have people that were willing to work with us and figure it out. So we were able to move people around to August, and, a few people moved to 2021 and stuff like that. We were able to figure that one out. And yeah, just hoping that we can get out there and fish, because I think a lot of people are just wanting to get out and get on the water and relax after being cooped up for so long.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, you were telling me you were fishing in Colorado, and it's pretty crazy, right? It's crowded. Just people want to get out and get stir crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The parking lots are overflowing right now. So, seeing people going for a hike and stuff like that, it's pretty crazy. I think people, they've got the time off right now. So, they're all just going out fishing and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So, or hiking. And,
sure.
Yeah. So it's busy out there.
Yeah. So what we're doing here on the Destination Angler is we've set up a GoFundMe site for guides around the show. We're going to try to raise $10,000 to help support these guys. And, I know that it's tough times for a lot of folks, but if you're one of those people who are in pretty good shape and you're in a position to support it, we'd be really grateful if you could do that. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot here. I know one other thing that we wanted to talk about was the some of the research that's going on with the humpback whales. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. One of the cool things, about the area that we're in and having Glacier Bay National Park, right at our front door is it's an incredibly rich area with wildlife, and there's a lot of research that takes place there. So the longest ongoing whale study for humpback whales has been going on in Glacier Bay National Park. And so they've been monitoring all of the humpback whales and calf reproduction. And, they go out every year and they have a research vessel and, checks on how the whales are doing.
Oh, that's great. So, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool project that they're doing, and kind of ties into everything else about how the ecology and everything of the area has been changing
Right.
over the last 50 years.
What an amazing place, Alaska and Elfin Cove Lodge. It sounds absolutely spectacular, kind of a trip of a lifetime. Kieran, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best place to get a hold of us is at our website. So it's elfincoveresort.com, and our contact info and everything is on there. And if they want to see pictures of the lodge and kind of the area and the wildlife and everything, that's all on there for them to check out.
Okay, that's the best way to do it. And then we talked before the show that you're going to send me some pictures of your fly box for you fly fishermen, and maybe a little bit about the setup you're doing. And I'll post those pictures on the Destination Angler Facebook page. And I'll also put all this information in our show notes. So our music is by A Brothers Fountain, and you can email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. That's shaigh50@gmail.com. Give us a like, share, or follow on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.